something in Databox is far more interesting to look at than, a PowerPoint deck or a spreadsheet, although some people love their spreadsheets, or whatever it might be. So I think, we feel our clients just being more in tune with their own performance and even checking on things when we're not on the phone with them, which is kind of nice. We're definitely spending less time pulling together those reports at the end of the month, but we've kind of centered our whole process around leveraging it, using that data as a part of a center point of our conversations and our actions.
Sean, welcome to the Agency Spotlight Series. How are you doing today?
Doing great. How about you?
I'm really good. Just loving this warm weather here in New England. So
not me. I want the cool fall weather.
Yeah. So we usually start people off with a couple basic questions here. So just could you tell me a bit about your agency in terms of how many employees you have, what your average deal size is, what kind of companies you usually work with, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. Yeah. So Pepperland Marketing, we're based in Cheshire, Connecticut. We're a pretty lean team. We're currently 5 people strong, slowly growing. And we've been around since 2015, so only a few years now. And, basically we are helping our clients grow traffic, generate leads, and acquire more customers. And we do that through a variety of different ways. I know you guys work with a lot of inbound marketing agencies. We're big into inbound, fully bought into that. We're part of the HubSpot ecosystem. But we also do a lot of more advanced SEO work, some pretty advanced analytics work, Google Analytics implementations, things like that. So slightly different than some of the other inbound agencies out there. And you also asked about industries, right? We do a lot of work in higher ed, but also kind of industrial manufacturing and a few oddball clients currently. But we work with companies we like and we feel can really help grow.
Nice. And so what was life like before you started using Databox?
Well, again, we've only been around since 2015. So life before Databox also for me personally kind of takes me back into when I was like on the other side, when I wasn't with an agency. But we still had to do a ton of reporting, like on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, annual, you name it. So in that prior life, but then also, with the agency in the early days, I would say it was too much time spent in PowerPoint and Excel. Pretty much working with our clients, towards that end of the month, we'd be spending hours building these really kind of clunky Excel reports that were like 50 megabytes large, and then find some way to package that into a PowerPoint presentation. And eventually that became, Google Sheets and Google Slides. So we, modernized a little bit, but still a pretty kind of painful process. And then, when your calculations would be wrong, so the data in the deck would be slightly different than what the client was seeing in, say, Google Analytics or AdWords, whatever it might be. So it's just messy and error-prone and not where we wanted to be spending our time.
Yeah, and did you guys ever experience any consequences from that, towards the end of the month when you would start to look at the data, or were you good at looking at the data still throughout the month?
We were still looking at the data throughout the month, not as much as we do now, but I'm kind of a data-driven guy, so I love being in the data. I like, using it to tell a story. So for me personally, it's always been a part of the way I work. But in terms of the reporting aspect, it was just a lot of stress. And when you did have that one mistake, that could erode some of the trust that you developed with the client. And that's obviously something that you want to avoid. So there was a little bit of that for sure, but just generally speaking, not a fun or particularly useful use of our time.
And what's changed since you adopted Databox?
Well, it's been a slow change, at least early on, where it was kind of hard to break our clients from expecting that more manual type of reporting. Some of our clients still ask for that, and we'll accommodate it when it's necessary. But as we've gotten them bought into the process, I think it's helped in a lot of ways. One is that, I would say that the biggest thing is that they're more tuned into their data. something in Databox is far more interesting to look at than, a PowerPoint deck or a spreadsheet, although some people love their spreadsheets, or whatever it might be. So I think, we feel our clients just being more in tune with their own performance and even checking on things when we're not on the phone with them, which is kind of nice. We're definitely spending less time pulling together those reports at the end of the month, but we've kind of centered our whole process around leveraging it, using that data as a part of a center point of our conversations and our actions. So it's easier now, but it's also more, the data part is more present in what we're doing on a day-to-day.
Yeah, let's take that from step one here. How do you set expectations initially in the sales process? Like that's going to be the way you work with them?
Well, a lot of our clients come to us with already some frustrations around their data, not really knowing, but in some cases not knowing anything, having no firm grasp on what their performance looks like. But in others, they don't trust what they're seeing. They don't know that they're looking at the right information, or it's just too difficult to get to it. So in the sales process, we'll typically bring up Databox and show some examples of how we use that, and that gets them excited early on. But then throughout that sales process, we try to get them to a point where we could establish SMART goals. So, what are we actually trying to do for you? What are the specific results that we're trying to help achieve during this engagement? And when possible, we try to lock that down during the sales process. It almost always does change somewhat once we really dive a little bit deeper. But it's something we kind of bring into the mix day one.
You said a lot of them might be a little questionable around their own data or not as familiar with working with it. How are they currently setting goals? How are they setting goals before they start working with you?
They're not.
Yeah.
The concept of setting goals and knowing what your KPIs are and just having something to work towards. For most businesses, it's just marketers at least seems to be a new concept. Not for everybody, for sure. Yeah. But generally speaking, they are just not. That's not something that's top of mind. A goal to most of our clients, at least when we're first starting to work with them, is, well, did we create the content we said we were going to create? So just kind of deliverable based versus what the impact of those deliverables are, and how that's contributing to bigger business objectives and goals. So we're kind of teaching them too, saying here's how you can show the impact of your marketing efforts or the impact of what we're doing as a part of your marketing efforts, and they value that, but it takes some time.
Yeah, what I was going to ask next is, how do they handle it when you bring up the concept of a concrete goal? Is that feel like a lot? Do they feel intimidated?
Intimidated, and there's always some hesitation. So we usually give them two scenarios. So like here's kind of that modest conservative goal where you're not setting that bar too high. But if all the pieces fall into place, here's the potential of where we might potentially get to. And in many cases, I feel people are a little bit scared to even stick to that kind of conservative goal. But, over time, when you start to have some quick wins, they get more comfortable. They're more willing to share that with others internally, and they warm up to it.
How do you build the confidence that you guys are going to be able to get them there? So it sounds like we've been talking about revenue so far. How do you tell them the story of how you're going to help them hit that revenue goal?
During the sales process, we always try to give them some quick wins. So we will typically come to the table with something that, if they implement it even before they're a client, they should see some results. So we're trying to show by doing. We want to provide value day one. And usually we can achieve that. If not, we're going to look for those quick wins in the very early days and say, here's that metric we were trying to move. Here's what we expected would happen. Here's what actually happened. And very quickly you start to develop that trust, and they start to see how it all comes together.
Nice. And then so it sounds like so far you've got the quick win that you establish, and there's the big annual goal. How do you break that up into smaller increments so that your team can feel good about what you need to do each month to get there? Are you using quarterly goals? Are you using monthly? How do you do that?
It depends on the client. So, it depends on their sales cycle. So we have one client who, they're maybe closing 3 to 4 deals a year, but they're massive, massive deals. So it's a very long sales cycle. In their case, we might be pretty much looking at things annually, but trying to break that down into quarterly or at least semi-annual goals. Other clients, it's month to month. Other clients, it's week to week. It really depends on who their audience is, what their sales cycle looks like, and that determines where we're going to actually establish those benchmarks. At the beginning, we will look at an annual goal and try to reverse engineer their funnel based off their historic performance. If they don't have that data available to us, we'll kind of work with industry benchmarks and say, once we have a better idea, we'll refine this. But if you need to make X amount of dollars in new business, how many deals is that going to require? How many leads does the marketing team need to pass over to sales? How many new visits do we need to get to the website? So, kind of standard stuff where we're reverse engineering the funnel to establish some benchmarks early on. And then once we get some real data when we're working together, we're always going to go back and refine that. So there's usually a course correction after a month or so. But once you get past that initial hurdle using tools like Databox, we eventually get to a point where we're making adjustments almost on a weekly basis. So here's the monthly goal, and you're in the second week of the month and you realize you're not going to hit that. So let's reset expectations and figure out what we need to do differently to course correct. And we're seeing a whole lot more of that as time goes on, as we leverage Databox more in our weekly check-ins with our clients. We're able to get much more fluid in what we're doing on a week-to-week, month-to-month basis.
Yeah, sure. And then, so it sounds like you have a couple different goal cadences depending on the type of client, depending on the deal size. How do you manage that internally? Is there an account manager that's doing that communication, or how do they handle the different timelines as you go?
Yep. So we've kind of adopted the pod structure. We're a small team, so as we scale, that's how we plan on doing it. But every client that we work with has a dedicated strategist, so it's not really an account manager, although they're playing sort of a dual role where they're providing strategy and advice to the client, but also managing the project. And then others on the team who are also supporting the client. So that dedicated strategist, that's the person who's having the conversation with the client to, make recommendations as to what those goals should be, getting that feedback and sign off from the client. And then what we've just started to do is leverage your goals feature in Databox to start to, document that in the tool and use that as sort of our central place where we're measuring progress. That's a pretty new thing to us, so we're not really sure, how well that's going to go, but I'm pretty optimistic.
Nice. And you mentioned weekly check-ins before. What happens on the weekly check-ins? So those calls, those emails, what goes on there?
Yep. So they're calls. When possible, we get on camera just like we're doing now, and we're doing a few things. We're now starting with performance. So we pull up their dashboards in Databox, and we go through. It's usually 3 to 5 different dashboards that we've created. Data walls. I want to use the branded terms here.
Data boards.
Data boards. Thank you. Data boards. But there's usually one that we spend a lot of focus on. And if necessary, we'll go to kind of the secondary ones to tell more of a story. But we'll spend a few minutes going through that, seeing how we're doing. Are we on track? Are we falling short? And what do we see as kind of the reason behind it? So we'll usually do some analysis of their data before the call to understand some of those underlying trends. So we're coming to the call prepared with some insights and recommendations based off what we're seeing. Beyond that, if necessary, we'll discuss. But other than that, we're kind of saying, here's what we achieved this past week. Here's what we're planning on working on over the next few days. And then answering any questions the client might have, trying to help to kind of be that person they can bounce ideas off of or kind of think through other things that they're doing at the organization.
How does the account strategist stay on top of the client's data? Are they checking manually? Are they getting alerts? How do they know what's going on in the client's data on that weekly cadence?
Well, certainly, we have to know what we see in Databox, right? So what the client's going to see, we want to make sure we know about that, right? So we actually do spend time looking at those, but we're also drilling in deeper from into the actual source, whether that's Google Analytics or Google Ads or HubSpot, whatever it might be. So we do try to go a level deeper than what we could actually see in the in their dashboards to be able to tell that story. And that's just a part of our weekly account work that we do. We, try to understand what's happening with the client's account.
And how do you decide whether you need to take action on the data? Like, let's say you're a little bit off on the monthly numbers. You don't know if you should stick out the strategy or change it up. Like, how do you guys internally just put your foot down and say it's time to change or we need to stick?
That's a good question. I think a big part of that is our confidence level. If we make this change, how likely are we that we're right? How likely is it that the client's going to agree to do what we recommend? That's a big factor. Is that something we could do within our current agreement, or do we have to add to the current agreement? Are we working within their current budget constraints? Is it going to require that they're going to have to pull in additional resources? So we're kind of balancing all those factors to make that determination. That's actually, we're trying to solidify a framework for having those conversations with our clients. I'm sure some of your other partners are doing the whole growth-driven design thing. And there's this concept of a wish list. We have that with our clients now, where we have this backlog of wish list items, and we'll kind of use that as a parking lot for ideas, where we'll prioritize, have that conversation with the client, and when necessary, get their approval. In other cases, we'll just dive in and do it.
Nice. And how do you ensure that your account strategists are reviewing the data before that the weekly call with the client? Is that just something you say it needs to be done 3 days before, or there's a meeting that happens? Like, how do you ensure?
Sure. Oh yeah. So we are using Teamwork as our project management tool. So we're getting pretty aggressive with staying on top of that. Good communication there. But we also have a team meeting internally where we just review all accounts at the beginning of the week, go through performance, talk about what's coming up, what went well, what didn't go well, and that just keeps us in tune. So.
Nice. You made a comment earlier that you said you started doing weekly goals with clients, right? What motivated you to do that?
We're just fully bought into the idea that you need to document your goals. You need to stay focused. I think we can get much better at that. I think we're okay, but I think there's still a long way for us to go. So it's a part of our culture where we're pushing ourselves to kind of take it up a notch every single month. And for us, I think that's one thing that we could do better. I think it's going to be good for our clients. It's going to be good for us. And we're fortunate that we have the right tools in place to hopefully facilitate that. So that's where we're going.
And last part here, have you noticed any difference in the way that clients have acted now that you're discussing things on a weekly basis? Have they gotten more engaged with the data? Have they been thankful? Like, how have they reacted to that weekly cadence?
Yeah, I think so. I think generally speaking, our clients like it. They like this approach. It's a part of why they chose to work with us in the first place. For those who've been with us for a longer time, maybe it takes a little bit longer to adapt. But our new clients, we had somebody on the call the other day. This was maybe our second or third time having a check-in, and we had somebody new to the call, and they made a comment after reviewing after reviewing Databox. They said, we have been hoping to get something like this for years, and if this is where you're starting, you've set the bar really, really high for yourselves. And I'm like, oh. And they told us they took a screenshot of what they were looking at and they sent it off to some VP. So they love this stuff. I think there's a gap. They need help understanding and interpreting the data, knowing where they should be focused, where they should be concerned. So we try to help there, and I'm sure your other partners are doing the same thing.
Yeah. All right. I think that's an awesome point to end here. Really appreciate your time, Sean, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.